I'm Bruce Karasik, co-founder of the Jewish Republican Alliance, speaking to you live from Southern California. Thank you for joining us today for another special edition of JRA LoudSpeaker. We are thrilled to have and welcoming Rabbi Dov Fischer to our show. We'll be speaking with Rabbi Fischer in just a few minutes, but first, it is a fact that the majority of Jews vote for Democrats, despite the fact that President Trump has been the biggest supporter of Jews and Israel of any president during our lifetime. President Trump was the only modern US president to visit Israel during his first trip abroad, the first US president to recognize Israel as Israel's capital and open an embassy there, the first US president to recognize the Golan Heights as sovereign Israeli territory, and the first sitting US president to pray at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. President Trump showed immense strength with these acts and didn't back down when facing opposition, fearlessly standing up for what was right. His visit to the Western Wall in Jerusalem, a symbol of Jewish heritage, sent a powerful message of support to Israel and Jews worldwide. President Trump's unwavering commitment to Israel was extraordinary. He acted where others hesitated and kept his campaign promises. The Jerusalem Embassy Act, passed by Congress in 1995, was ignored by every other president. For over 20 years, every previous American president had exercised a waiver, avoiding the relocation, believing that that would promote peace. However, President Trump defied this trend, fearlessly standing up for Israel and doing what was right, even in the face of warnings about potential violence, which ultimately never occurred. Let's talk about the Iran nuclear deal. President Trump, with his wisdom and foresight, saw the dangers posed by this disastrous agreement and took a stand to protect Israel and America's security. He withdrew from the deal, putting the safety of our two nations first, and exposed the billions of dollars sent to Iran by the Obama-Biden administration. Yet, Joe Biden decided to ignore the lessons of history and tried to rush back into this flawed deal, empowering Iran, a nation openly committed to destroying Israel and the United States. And you know what? 78% of Israelis believed that this deal endangered Israel. But did Joe Biden and Barack Obama care? Nah, they decided to embrace the deal. But that's not all. Let's not forget about the historic Abraham Accords, a monumental achievement of the Trump administration. Under the leadership of President Trump, his senior advisor, Jared Kushner, Special Representative Avi Berkowitz, and Ambassador David Friedman, peace treaties were signed with Israel's Arab neighbors like Jordan, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. The region saw unprecedented progress toward peace and cooperation, but the Biden administration, in their short-sightedness, canceled this transformative program, turning back all the progress that President Trump had initiated. President Trump signed an executive order put into place to fight anti-Semitism, particularly where it's really needed on college campuses. In 2017, President Trump signed the Uncompensated Survivors Today Act, ensuring that Holocaust survivors and their heirs are able to receive compensation for property taken away by the Nazis and post-World War II communist governments that followed. He also signed the Never Again Education Bill, providing $10 million in federal funds to expand Holocaust education for future generations. He closed the PLO office in Washington, cut an additional $200 million from foreign aid to Palestinians, and eliminated $10 million in funding for Israeli-Palestinian coexistence programs. But what did Joe Biden do when he took office? He reinstated all the aid to the Palestinians without demanding any preconditions to recognize Israel's right to exist. This is nothing short of a slap in the face to Israel and a betrayal of our long-standing alliance. As we move forward toward our upcoming election year decisions, let us remember these stark differences. Let us stand in firm support of Israel and demand accountabilities from our leaders. We must ensure that our voices are heard and that we continue to champion those who truly prioritize the safety and prosperity of the United States, Israel, and the Jewish community. Thank you all for being part of this critical discussion today. Together, we can make a difference and protect the future of the United States of America and our beloved Israel. Thank you all for joining us. And now it is my privilege to introduce to you, live from Franklin, Tennessee, fellow co-founder Mitch Silberman. Mitch.
Hello, JRA community. It is always so great when we are together. Many of you know that Stephanie and I moved to the Nashville area 10 months ago. And since then, we've gotten pretty involved with Chabad of Nashville. We just adore that rabbi. And we were at services 3 weeks ago tonight. And the rabbi at the end, on the bima, gave his little speech. And he said he was getting ready to shut off his phone before Shabbat services when an unrecognized number came through a call. So, of course, he answered it. And the woman on the other end said, "Hi, Rabbi. My name is Natalie. My daughter and I are visiting from out of town. We don't know where to get Shabbat candles." And the rabbi, being the mensch that he is, said, "Please join us. Come for our Shabbat services. We're having a community dinner afterwards. Please join us." And they did. So as we sat down for dinner, we invited Natalie and her 23-year-old daughter to come sit with us. We're having a good time. Turns out they were in town for something called Freedom Fest. And then the daughter said, "Hey, I need an extra chair because my friend is going to show up any minute to join us." We said, "Great." Well, her friend walked in the door and my jaw dropped. I thought my identical twin had walked right into the building. In fact, I thought I was staring at a mirror. And I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see for yourself. Now, if you can't tell, I'm the guy on the left. Okay, so why do I share this with you? You may not know him, but you'll know his story. You might recall it. He was born Enes Kanter, and he changed his name literally and legally to Enes Freedom. He was the center for the Boston Celtics, the NBA team. And during his time with the Celtics, he had the temerity to speak up against China and their human rights abuses, specifically how they're treating the Uyghurs, the atrocities. Well, the NBA wouldn't have it. They said, you can talk about institutional racism, you can talk about how terrible America is and white supremacy, but don't you dare talk badly about China. He has essentially been blackballed from the league at 31 years old, but he loves basketball. So at Shabbat dinner, he shared with us that one of his pet projects, he went to Israel and he created a basketball league or camp for children 8 to 18. And all the joy he got by putting teams together, he purposely put Muslims and Jews, Israelis and Palestinians on the same team so they could play together, work together, high five each other, hug each other. And it was incredible what he saw because he is truly all about freedom and unity and peace. That's his calling. And for that, his home country of Turkey considers him a terrorist. He cannot go back to his country. He has not seen his family in 10 years. Okay, but this is his calling. And it was so great. I mean, to quote Don King, only in America could we have Shabbat dinner at Chabad of Nashville with a 7-foot-tall Muslim, right? It was just fantastic. And we were talking about it. You know, no child hates Israelis on their own. They are taught it. They're taught to hate, whether it's blacks, Jews, Israelis, Muslims, Palestinians. They're taught to hate, which means they have to be taught to unhate, or better yet, taught to get along from the very beginning. Now, is anti-Semitism an issue? Yeah. Does it exist? Of course. Now, here in America, it does exist on the far, far right, the fringes. Fortunately, they're neutered. They don't have any power. I mean, it's been decades since I've been invited to a white supremacy meeting. I don't know. They don't include me. But you know where anti-Semitism is very prevalent and very open. They don't hide it anymore. Sadly, in the so-called institutions they're always railing against, specifically academia and now the government, our own Congress, and now even our own White House. It's on full display. Well, what do we do about anti-Semitism? We Jews are not victims. I can't think of a better person to talk to us about anti-Semitism than our guest speaker today. And I just have to share with you, years and years ago, I started reading this column about how great this country is and how great President Trump was for Jews, Israel, America, and the world. And I saw the author's name and it said Rabbi Dov Fischer. So I reached out to him and I had two questions for him. Number one, did you really write this article? And number two, are you really a rabbi? And I've been very blessed that I got to know him. And he spoke twice at our Newport Beach chapter. So it's my privilege to introduce him to you today. Rabbi Dov Fischer, Esquire, is a National Vice President of Coalition for Jewish Values, representing over 2,500 traditional Orthodox rabbis, and a senior contributing editor at the American Spectator and columnist for Israel National News, and has been adjunct professor of law at two prominent Southern California law schools for 20 years, and previously practiced as a complex litigation attorney at three of America's most prestigious law firms. Beyond that, in his parallel career, Rabbi Fischer serves as rabbi of Young Israel of Orange County, California, and leadership roles in several national rabbinic and other Jewish organizations. His dynamic, powerful writings on public affairs, both on general, political, social, religious, and cultural topics, as well as subjects specifically focused on issues concerning Jews and Judaism, particularly in America and Israel, appear regularly in the American Spectator and Israel National News. Arutz Sheva. Welcome, Rabbi. We're thrilled to have you today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course.
And I don't know if you've ever had a guest who had the temerity to correct either of you.
Oh,
May I just put in a minority report on just one quick little comment before we start?
of course.
There are no such thing as Palestinians.
Oh,
It's a fraud. It's a fraud on history. They are Arabs living in the Middle East. The land of Israel was renamed by Rome in order to destroy the connection of the Jewish people with the land of Israel. They renamed the land Palestine based on the previous people who lived there, the Philistines, the Plishtim. And that name continued. But even though they renamed it Palestine, Jews never stopped praying for Israel, turning to Israel 3 times in our daily prayers. After we eat a meal, we pray for Israel in our grace after meals, and so on and so forth. And when in the 20th century, Jews merited the opportunity to liberate the land from the British occupation forces and rename it Israel, we put an end to the name Palestine. But the term, one more word on that, the term Palestine historically, to the degree that it's a wrong name, nevertheless always applied to the Jews and Israel. United Jewish Appeal, before Israel was created in 1948, was known as United Palestine Appeal. The underground organization, the Irgun, raised money in America under a group called the American League for a Free Palestine. Jews were the Palestinians. And it was only in 1964, after Ahmed Shukari tried a new approach, they created the fiction of Palestinian Arabs. So I just wanted to briefly interject. There are no Palestinians. There's no such thing as Palestine. There are Arabs living in Judea and Samaria. And welcome. Thank you for having me.
this is why we have you on the show. That was great, Rabbi. Thank you.
Very informative. And I guess I should have said the so-called Palestinian.
Sounds nice. That's a sweet sound.
So in my opening remarks, I contrasted the difference in the way President Trump has stood up for Israel and for Jews in America and in Israel. And yet I get asked by conservative Christians all the time why Jews on the left do not support Jews or Israel. And I've asked several of friends who are on the left, and they always said, well, you know, Israel is not my number one issue. So one, do you get that question? One, two, how do you respond? And what can we do about it?
Objection, compound question. I'm sorry, I can't help it. That's 20 years of teaching law. I get that question all the time. And this is my response on several levels. A lot of Americans take for granted the way this country works, the way democracy works. And a lot of people think that individuals vote based on simply what they believe. It's amazing how many people blindly vote simply because that's the way their parents and grandparents voted, or because they live in a community where there's only one party. We have two official parties, Republicans and Democrats, but Brooklyn, New York, for example, it's a one-party county, the Democrats. A guy like Dov Fischer, who was a New York State Assemblyman for 36 years, was a registered Democrat and served in the state assembly as a Democrat. Dov Fischer never was a Democrat, not from day one. In his heart and his soul, I knew Dov Fischer. Dov Fischer was a sensible, moderate conservative with the values that the Jewish Republican Alliance holds. But he knew that in order to have an impact in the state of New York, he'd never have a chance if he tried to run as a Republican. So he ran as a Democrat. He kept getting elected for 36 years. And he was voted repeatedly into office by hundreds of thousands of Jews who also are Republicans, but registered Democrat, because there's only one party. And now that he's retired, he announced he's joining the Republican Party. A lot of people don't realize, but for 100 years, conservatives in the United States South, Dixie, the Confederacy, I mean, who's more right-wing than the Southern Democrats? Southern Democrats? Conservative Americans in the South, Dixie people, Confederates, voted straight Democrat for 100 years. Every state, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, you just go through all of them, voted 2 Democrat senators and 1 Democrat governor after another for 100 years, from the late 1800s, the time of the Civil War, until the 1970s and 80s when Ronald Reagan came. And it was the Reagan-Jimmy Carter moment that the South finally liberated themselves from the Democrat Party. Now, you know what that meant? That meant the Republican presidents, when they named Supreme Court nominees and needed to get 51 votes in the US Senate, could not get through their Supreme Court nominees because Democrats representing conservative right-wing Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, etc., were voting against the Republican candidates. So one stops and says, explain to me how people with Republican souls, conservatives, throughout 5, 6, 7, 8 states, sent 16 senators nonstop for 100 years who stood against what they believe in. And I talk about that to Christian audiences. And I ask them, how did Christians do that to America? And that's a little bit of what the Jewish problem is in voting. A lot of Jews just blindly have been reared to believe that they're Democrats, that that's the party of their family. That's the party when they immigrated to America. So they just vote that party without really studying. But something is changing, just as it happened with Christians in the South. There is a change taking place. I'm not simply saying that I feel it, I'm saying that people come to me and, like Dov Fischer, tell me, all my life I was a Jewish Democrat. I'm moving over to becoming a Republican. This is my last straw, or that is my last straw. Ocasio is my last straw, or Ilhan Omar is my last straw. Rashida Tlaib or Biden is my last straw. Lincoln is my last straw. Obama was my last straw. And the numbers, if you look at it's a slow progression. Jews are voting more and more Republican with each subsequent election. The New York State governor race was an extraordinary example of how Jews almost put a Republican in as the governor. It made him a national hero for Republicans in general. How did he do so well? Well, because Jews are starting to vote in that direction. And as I wind this answer down, do you know how many Jews actually have decided we can't vote Republican here in New York because it's a one-party state? Do you know how many Orthodox Jews have moved from the state of New York to Florida in the last 3 years? Orthodox communities are growing. Yeshivas are growing all over Florida now as they move to red states. My own shul, Youngersville of Orange County in California, a very blue state. Even though Irvine, I like to speak about us as the center of the resistance, I've lost about 10 families in the last 3 years to red states, to Texas, to Florida. They're leaving my state because Orthodox Jews in particular, and being followed by others, are moving towards a more conservative worldview. And it's just a matter of time. It's a transition. It's a trajectory.
You know, Rabbi, I want to build on that very informed answer you gave. I am one of those conservative Jews that left California, and there's so many former Californians here in the Nashville area. It's pretty remarkable. What do you see the trajectory? I love that word, trajectory. What do you see going on? Because when you mention the last straw, there are Jewish and even Christian diehard Democrats that vote because their parents did or they always did, whatever the reason, and yet they see the open anti-Semitism or aggression to Israel, yet they still vote Democrat. In fact, I even asked a friend, I said, Israel is so incredibly important to you, yet you keep voting Democrat. So what do you think will really be the last straw, and where is that trajectory taking us? Because I see it taking too long, and for us, it was enough is enough, but it never seems to be enough for the people that keep voting Democrat.
It is taking too long when you're living in the middle of time, in the present. It's only with the vantage point of history, and that takes time for someone to see that there was a movement and a transition in place. Let me share with you 2 or 3 quick thoughts on that. Outside the United States, and this is something I share with my Christian friends as well, outside the United States, throughout the world, Jews are conservatives. The United States is an aberration. In the last election, do you know how many Jews voted in England for the Conservative Party? 69%. I mean, it was the largest demographic vote for the Conservatives anywhere in England. 3-1, by 3-1, Jews voted Conservative. Somebody's going to say, well, maybe that was aberrational. Jews have been voting Conservative for the last several elections. You meet Jews from the former Soviet Union. You meet Jews from Ukraine. If there's one thing that people from Russia and Ukraine agree on, the Jews of Ukraine and Russia both despise communism, are right-wing, and it was the entrance of 1 million Jews from Russia and Ukraine into Israel that helped move Israel to the right. And where is there a more direct representation of where Jews are politically than the state of Israel, which now has become a reliably conservative, moderately conservative right-wing place? The state of Israel today, you have a Knesset that is 64 seats in the hands of moderate center-right, and religiously conservative political parties. And in the opposition, there are another 15 to 20 seats of right-wingers who simply don't like Bibi Netanyahu on personal reasons, just as there are Republicans in America who would sooner vote Democrat and destroy the country just to avoid voting for Trump. But you take out the personal craziness, they're conservatives. And in the same way, so Israel now, 80 out of the 120 seats of the present Knesset are right-wing seats. So all over the world, Jews now are right-wing. And all of these were transitional, taking place over time. And that's what's happening in America. It's going a little bit slow. The message takes a little bit longer to get across the Atlantic Ocean. But Jews are moving in the right direction. And the last word on that is that, you know, if they don't figure it out on their own, Mitch, they're going to figure it out when they get kicked out anyway. They're going to be kicked out anyway. It's like Jews in communist Russia. Trotsky and Zinoviev and Kamenev, Radek, they all thought this is their home. And one by one, they were taken into a room and they were shot to death. The charges were read against them if they were kept up for about 3-4 weeks without sleep. They were put in a private room. signed a confession, shot to death. And the Communist Party spit them out. And that's what's happening with the Democrats. These Jews, they're being spit out anyway. They don't have a place. They don't fit in with affirmative action. They don't fit in with intersectionalism. They don't fit in with the Women's March. They don't fit in, and they're being kicked out. It's just going to happen one way or another.
Important comments. Just to follow up a little bit on that, I think there are two places where we as conservative Jews can strengthen our position. We'd love to know your thoughts. One is on college campuses and probably in the high schools too, where our young people are bombarded with BDS movement, Israel's a pariah, the so-called Palestinians are the victims, and that I think shapes people's opinions as they grow older, and they wind up landing on that side. And the other place where we've lost some control is when President Trump left office and Nikki Haley was no longer the UN ambassador. We've lost some real support in the UN because we do not have that strong voice anymore speaking there. So what are your thoughts on those two areas?
Objection, compound question. Here we go.
We got a lot to fit in a short period of time.
It's okay. By the way, since I began with a matter of semantics, just a quick point. Both Mitch called himself a conservative Jew, and Bruce, you've called yourself a conservative Jew. I'd like to suggest that a better term is you're a Jewish conservative. There are Orthodox Jews, Reform Jews, and conservative Jews. It's an historical anomaly for another day and another time how conservative Judaism got a name like that when it's so far left of center. It's an anomaly. It was created as conservative Judaism in contrast to the crazy off the tracks Reform Judaism. So compared to Reform Judaism, they're conservative. Compared to real Judaism, they're off the tracks left wing also. So you're not conservative Jews. You go to Chabad, you're Jews who are conservative, Jewish conservatives. Let's get to your two questions. Campuses, number one. When I was in Columbia University as an undergraduate, that place is so left of center. You actually need to have your shoes done orthopedically so you can walk straight and be balanced on the earth, since everything there is tilted to the left. It's bad for your spine. You have to bend over backwards, leaves you later on with spondylosis or whatever it's called. I was on campus, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but if you were an undergraduate in Columbia University in the 1970s, that campus overnight became pro-Israel. The movement on campus was pro-Israel because, and I'm not tooting my own horn, I'm being very serious, because I was there. I was a college kid, and I was fiery for Israel, and I organized on campus for Israel, and I defied the campus environment, and I signed up kids, my friends, my classmates, and we made trouble, and we had campus rallies for Israel, and we did not buy into the common sense in front of us that we're in the minority. We became the squeaky wheel on campus. And we took some money and we advertised in the Columbia Daily Spectator issues that mattered to us about Israel. We brought on campus really strong speakers for Israel. And we became such a powerful voice that in 1975, the New York Times wrote a story on graduating class at Columbia in 1975. It's the Ivy League school in the New York area, and every year the Times does a story on graduation day. And they asked the students, what is the most active political movement at Columbia University that you experienced during your 4 years? And students said it was the group supporting Israel. Now that's impossible to believe because Columbia was so left-wing. But on campus, there was one kid making a stir. That was myself. And by the way, I was elected by the undergraduate student body, the kids in the college, to represent all of Columbia University's undergraduate college students as their representative in the University Senate. I got elected by name recognition. People knew me. You had 20 people running. Everybody had heard of Dov Fischer. So I got elected. And it was an anomaly. How the heck is this right-winger, because I'm not only pro-Israel, but I'm here speaking to you as a Republican conservative. I always was that. After changes upon changes, we are more or less the same. Some Jewish guy wrote a song like that. And I was a right-winger in college, and yet I got elected by the whole left-wing student body to represent them in the university senate. How did that happen? Because I stood up fearlessly. The problem we have today is kids, Jewish kids on the college campuses, don't have self-confidence. They don't stand up fearlessly. They get up and right away they start saying, the best of them, I'm a Zionist, we Zionists, we support Black Lives Matter. We support Ocasio and we support the squad. They're so defensive. They're so apologetic. Guess what, kids? We don't support Black Lives Matter. They're anti-Semitic. And even if they weren't, we don't believe in their values and in their agenda. We don't believe in Ocasio and the squad. Guess what, kids? You stand up like a proud Jew and you stand and you say, I stand for Israel. I'm a Zionist. You know what bothers me? Okay, now I'm getting angry. You know what bothers me? I don't have a stomach for it. And I apologize to this young lady because she's a big national Jewish hero. I don't have a stomach for a college kid who gets elected student body president and is a Zionist. And then because of all the anti-Zionism around her, she quits because she can't take it anymore. I don't have a stomach for Jewish kids in positions of leadership in student bodies who resign their positions because the anti-Semitism and the anti-Zionism is too strong. You know what? You got elected, you stand your turf. You stand your turf and you show them that they cannot pull you down and they cannot intimidate you. And that's the first step. There are campuses, I want to know why, if there's BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction Israel, why aren't they proactive instead of always being defensive and just warding them off with a shield? Why don't we have students on campus bringing resolutions? We want to boycott China. I'd say they should boycott Arab countries. We should be boycotting on campus. We should have resolutions before student bodies. We want a boycott of Syria and of Saudi Arabia. There's only one problem: the Arabs don't produce anything. The Arabs, Israel produces the CT scan, the latest technology in medicine, the latest technology in agriculture, the latest technology in technology. They made Waze, they made GPS. Israel created. The Arabs don't create anything. It's like almost anti-Semitic. They won't create anything productive for the world, so other than suicide belts. So there's nothing to boycott. Like you want to boycott Syria. What are you going to do? You're going to stop buying hummus? The thing is, even hummus we make. So the thing, what are you going to say? You're going to boycott pita? We make pita also. Syria doesn't produce anything useful for the world. Saudi Arabia, the oil is under their feet. What else do they produce? Medically, they produce nothing. There's nothing to, but what we should be doing is we should have motions on campus and force debates on campus. We want to boycott China because that's a place where they create things and they're racists. There's nobody who's ever been a head of.
Oh, looks like we lost him for a second.
Oh boy.
That's a first ever.
The rabbi disappeared. Come join us back.
No, we are not censoring him, ladies and gentlemen.
No. We're on the same page here. I have a feeling it's probably a technology issue. Anyway, I have so many comments to say to the rabbi because here he is. Hi, Rabbi.
Looks like he could be back.
That's my point. They can't stop us. They cannot stop us. You don't just take a setback and walk away and start crying and start saying they didn't like me. You disconnected me.
We made it clear we did not censor you.
We would never do that to you. You're one of us, Rabbi.
Takes a lot more to get rid of me.
Rabbi, I want to jump in with something you said because you were so right. And then there's so many great questions from the audience. You are very adored by the questions we're seeing. When we founded the JRA, we specifically use those words, Jewish Republican Alliance, because we're Jews first. So you are totally correct, and I like that small distinction. Before I'm going to try to get brief because we have so many great questions from the audience, but I want to ask you something, because you have such a command of the facts, and there are already people saying, where can I get what he said? And in a nutshell, if someone said to you, yeah, but white wing extremists, yeah, but anti-Semitism on the right, we know, our audience knows, does it come from the far right? Yeah, it exists, but that's not what the problem is. I mean, they're a problem, but it is not a goal. The problem is on the left. How would you, other than, oh yeah, well, it's worse on the left, what data or specifics would you give someone to arm them with? You think the problem is anti-Semitism on the right? Let me tell you about anti-Semitism on the left. How would you succinctly arm them with something to say about that?
It's a wonderful question, and we have the terrible disadvantage that, honestly, the media are there brainwashing the public.
Yep.
When I say the media, consider, on one side you have Fox News, you have Newsmax, you have America Online. On the other side, CBS, ABC, NBC, Public Broadcasting, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post. It's a wall you can't break. And they control, like when Fox News proudly says, we came out #1 in the ratings. Yeah, you outdrew CNN, you outdrew MSNBC, but when you add all of those media together, they swamp Fox. And those people are dominating the discussion. That's why JRA exists. That's why I Speak and Write. We do this because we know if we don't do it, individuals who are not sure will hear only one message and ultimately are brainwashed because that's all they hear. So they think that's what's the only sanity out there. They need to hear the other side. So when you ask your question, Mitch, every one of those media propagate the same lie that anti-Semitism is on the right. When a right-wing madman shoots up a temple, they highlight he was a right-wing extremist. And when a Muslim shoots up a temple, they don't tell you that. When a black person beats up a Jew, you have black people beating up Jews in the streets of Brooklyn, Williamsburg and Crown Heights. You have Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. You have people who are intersectionalists, people of color. They don't talk about those anti-Semites. They don't link them with anti-Semitism. But when someone on the extreme, they make more about Nick Fuentes, who is irrelevant. He's utterly irrelevant. They make more about him than they do about real bona fide black anti-Semites like Louis Farrakhan, Kanye West, that whole group of people. And what ends up happening is the only response I have is your eyes. Look in front of you. Don't read the newspaper. Look at where anti-Semitism comes from. What Nick Fuentes, you only find him on a YouTube if you search for Nick Fuentes. He has no following. He's a nothing. But when you start looking at everything out there, the president of Israel just spoke before the United States Congress. And by the way, I'm not his fan. For the record, I won't take up a lot of time. He doesn't deserve it. He's a leftist. He's an extreme leftist. He spent 20 years at the head of the Socialist Labor Party. He doesn't deserve to be president. That's all I have time for right now within our program here. But he came representing Israel. And even though he's a leftist, the extreme left of the Democrat Party boycotted him. And who are these people? Although many black representatives were in the room at the speech, Hakeem Jeffries and Sheila Lee Jackson, they were in the room. When you look at the people who boycotted, it was like almost universally black people, people of color, one after another. For us to go around denying black anti-Semitism and in general anti-Semitism of the left as a source of the worst problems the Jews now have in America is to be blind. And it comes back to the first question about Jews as Democrats. Like it or not, it's being shoved down our throats. And all it takes is for someone to encounter and experience personally. But that's where the problem lies. Final word on that. I've been writing for 8 years now, regularly in the American Spectator. It's a right-of-center journal. They have readers' comments. You would expect if anti-Semitism was rife on the right, you would expect every time Rabbi Dov Fischer appears as a columnist, there'd be all these anonymous posted anti-Semitic comments. It is remarkable. You don't get anti-Semitic comments. And it's not because they're editing them out. Bona fide conservatives are not inclined towards anti-Semitism. They're incredibly pro-Israel. They understand that Israel shares America's conservative values and traditions. They understand the Judeo-Christian Christian religion and heritage and tradition of America. And if you look from one to the next, National Review and The Wire, the Daily Wire, and all of these, and you read readers' comments, non-Jews respond to Israel with enormous love. And that's on the right. And if you look instead at responses and readers' comments in the Washington Post, New York Times, when they write about Israel, it's shocking how anti-Semitic it is from their side of the. So that's my answer to that.
Thank you, Rabbi. I have one more question, and then Mitch is going to take some questions from our audience coming up. I have a very strong belief about the two-state solution that has been proposed for so many years. And I object to the two-state solution on the following grounds. One is you never reward a country or a civilization or a people when their fundamental charter is designed not to recognize Israel's right to exist, to destroy them, to teach their young people how to attack Israel. They have not earned the right for a two-state solution. And even if they recognized Israel today, time needs to go by, in my mind, till they ever would earn that right back to have a two-state solution. What say you?
First of all, I support the two-state solution. I believe that West Virginia and Virginia should combine into one state. I've been advocating that for a long time. It's time to correct a historic error when West Virginia broke off from Virginia. They both speak with the same accent, and they have a common history. So I support that two-state solution. As far as the Middle East, in 1922, the mandate that the non-Jewish world called Palestine was divided into a two-state solution. Everything east of the Jordan River was given to the Arabs. Everything west of the Jordan River was given to the Jews. That includes Judea, Samaria, or what our enemies call the West Bank. The east was originally, they named it Transjordan because it's the other side of Jordan. Eventually, they decided they're not trans, so they renamed their country Jordan. And on the west of the Jordan River, you caught it, it took a minute. On the west of the Jordan River, that's Israel. What ended up happening later is there was an effort to tear away by the United Nations in 1947, tore away Judea, Samaria, Yehuda and Shomron, the so-called West Bank. If you've ever been there, and I'm sure you have been, to the cities of Jewish cities in Judea, Samaria, West Bank of what? It's not a West Bank. The Arabs call it the West Bank because they have no name for it. We have a name for it, Yehuda Shomron. The Bible, the Christian Bible, speaks of Judea and Samaria, not the West Bank. I've been in Judea and Samaria, in the Jewish communities of Ariel and Karnei Shomron and Beth El, and I could just go up and down, Ephrat. You don't see the Jordan River from any of them. It's not a West Bank. You know where you see the West Bank? In Jersey City, in Hoboken, in Secaucus. That's on the West Bank of the Hudson River, yet nobody calls it the West Bank. They call it New Jersey, even though it's the West Bank of New York, right? Even New York teams, the New York Giants football team, the New York Jets, they play in New Jersey. Why aren't they called the Jersey Giants and Jets? Because New Jersey's the West Bank of New York. When it comes to Israel, Judea and Samaria are the historic Jewish patrimony. That's where the country, if Jews don't have a right to live in cities like Shechem and in cities like Jerusalem, Bethlehem, if Jews don't have a right to Bethel, the places in the Bible where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah walked up and down where they lived, what right do Jews have to Tel Aviv and Herzliya? The Arabs, they claim a historic place there. Name one person in all of history who ever was the king of Palestine or the emperor of Palestine or the president of Palestine. They never had a country called Palestine. What's the name of their currency? In Israel, they have a shekel. In America, we have a dollar. In France, they have the franc, and in Germany, they have the mark. What currency did they have in Palestine? There's no Palestine. It was a fabrication. They never had a sports team. I saw an old Encyclopedia Britannica. For those of you who remember what an encyclopedia is, it's like Wikipedia, only 27 volumes that cost $3,000. The Encyclopedia Britannica, I saw one in 1962, didn't even mention Palestine. It mentioned mandatory Palestine, and it mentioned Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak Kook, Abraham Isaac Kook, as the chief rabbi of Palestine. That's before 1947, before it was renamed Israel. Chief rabbi of Palestine. Yasser Arafat had a chief rabbi. Hamas had a chief rabbi. They have no chief rabbi. They have no Palestine. So the subject of two-state solution from a Jewish perspective, that land belongs to us. They have no claim to it. They have no right to it. But from an American perspective, what kind of insanity does it take for an American government to want to create yet another Arabstan, another Islamistan? We are tied up with our military, with our financial, our budget in the billions and trillions, dealing with problems in Iraq, Afghanistan, dealing with Syria, dealing with Libya. Libya, they murdered our ambassador. Syria, we're stuck with people having to fight and deal with ISIS. You take country after country out there. The United States wants another country like that to have to deal with, for Iran and others in the Soviet Union to supply with weapons. The final word on that. You can't have Palestine anyway, because we see that when Ehud Barak, another beauty, when Ehud Barak unilaterally gave up southern Lebanon, and he thought, as a crazy leftist, by unilaterally giving it up, now we're going to have peace. Hezbollah came in, and now Israel has nonstop trouble in its north. Then when Ariel Sharon, at the end of his career, when he wasn't well and soon would be having the stroke that would kill him, crazily gave up Israel's Gaza position in Gush Katif and closed down 20 synagogues and gave it to the Arabs with some crazy idea that that's going to bring peace. He basically gave birth to Hamas. Now Israel has bombs and wars across that border in the south and across the north. If Israel were to give up Judea, Samaria, they would have a third front, and with the weapons that now exist, there would not be an inch of Israel where you'd be able to walk. Just as from Hamas in the south, they can reach with their weapons Ashkelon and Ashdod, and just as Hezbollah can reach even Tel Aviv now, and certainly Haifa, you'd have the center of Israel, Jerusalem and Ra'anana and Herzliya under constant bombardment. The whole country would be on. That would be the end of all the demonstrations, all the left-wing demonstrations in Israel. They'd have to create tunnels under the country, create a country with tunnels to have their demonstrations. So there must never, ever be, I don't even use the term two-state solution. That's Judea and Samaria, and I don't use the term Palestinians. They are the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. Thank you very much for the question.
Rabbi, I'm unclear. Just kidding.
I know.
I love your specificity and your passion. It's in your command of history is terrific.
Yeah.
We have so many, we only have 7 minutes left, and we have so many great questions from the audience who truly adore you. So let's try to be as brief as we can so we can get to as many as possible. There's one from Felix R that's really good. And he says, what do we say to non-Jewish friends and neighbors of different political persuasions who see the far left, and he puts in quotes, Jewish organizations like ADL and many similar as representative of the Jewish community? I know you've written about them, but it's a great question because non-Jews say, well, look at the ADL. And it's like, I want to pull the hair out of my head.
I found it very, very helpful and very true. I talk with people on this subject quite often. Number one, I ask a person, what is your faith? Person says, I'm a Catholic. I said, please explain to me as a Jew, since you're a Catholic, Joe Biden tells me that he's a practicing Catholic. Nancy Pelosi tells me she's a practicing Catholic. Sonia Sotomayor tells me she's a practicing Catholic. They're all in favor of abortion on demand, homosexual marriage, transgender, gender-affirming surgery. What's with the Catholics? Would you please explain to me, what is the Catholic thing? Why is there a Catholic in every single place that we, the Orthodox Jews, are trying to stand up for? We're trying to stand up against homosexual marriage, against transgenderism, and forcing people to bake rainbow cakes. Why are you Catholics in the forefront, President of the United States, former House Speaker, all you Catholics in the middle there? And then they explained to me, Rabbi, please understand, these are not true Catholics. These people don't stand for what the Catholic Church stands for. I said, thank you. You just answered your question to me.
Brilliant.
These are not Jews. These are
Love it.
not true Jews. These are people who wouldn't know a Talmud if it were put on their lap. And your rabbi from Tennessee was sitting there with his finger under the text saying, repeat after me. They don't know the difference between an olive and a pickle. They have no idea what Judaism is. Somewhere at age 13, they made a deal with their parents. Just shut up and memorize this recording for 3 weeks. It's a little recording in Hebrew. It's called a Haftorah or something like that. And everybody will bring you money and presents. So just shut up, do your Haftorah, make a speech about bringing peace to the world and fighting Dow Chemical, and then you can go on and become whatever you want. And that's my answer. That's my answer.
I was always taught to forgive, but not forget. And here's a little recent history that many people may know. Well, we all know, may not know, that Linda Sarsour hates Jews and Israel. She stands for the BDS movement. She's a supporter of Louis Farrakhan, who one of his amazing comments was that he's not an anti-Semite, he's an anti-termite, and insinuating that Jews should be exterminated. Bernie Sanders chose Linda Sarsour to be one of his spokesmen when he was running. And during the nominating convention for Joe Biden, they allowed Linda Sarsour to speak, which enraged me. And then he was exposed. And then what he did was he publicly disavowed her, but then sent privately his whole team over to them to apologize that we should have included you. We had to say this. Didn't that open the door to what Joe Biden's policies were going to be toward Israel, that his allegiance is to the left and he's not a strong supporter of Jews in Israel? Or
He is not a strong supporter. He is a tremendously, in many ways, he's the most hostile president Israel has encountered. He really is. Everyone knew that Obama was a terrible enemy of Israel, and it finally was nailed shut just as he was leaving office. One vengeful act against Israel, United Nations Security Council Resolution 2234, that would have said Jerusalem is no longer part of Israel and that denied Jews the right to their traditional and historic places. And for the first time, America did not veto such a resolution. In the same way, Biden has been impossible. We're blessed that he's not capable, and therefore he's not able to accomplish a lot of what he would if he were more capable. So in that sense, we're blessed. I'm going to leave more time for those questions, but I can go on about Biden and the fact that he has not invited the Prime Minister of Israel to visit and to meet, whereas he's been meeting with every other schlemiel and schlepper in the world, speaks as well, speaks monuments.
Well, Rabbi, let's do one last question, and then we're going to call it a wrap because we're going over a little bit. Boy, there's so many. There's just amazing questions, and it's so hard to pick which one. But I guess, you know, I saw Charlie Kirk speak here in Franklin, Tennessee, and he said something very bold, and I want to apply that to my question to you. He said out loud that, I'm sorry to tell you this, but most of your churches are led by weak cowards. He says, because they're not standing up, they're not doing the right thing. He gave the context in the Christian sense. So we have a question from, where is it? One of the, asking about the temples here. Like, when are the temples going to be speaking up about, you know, what they see going on in our culture, in Judaism, about the evils that really threaten Israel and frankly, Judeo-Christian values? When are the rabbis going to speak up and say something? Is really a very troubling situation.
The Reformed temples of the United States, by and large, are not Jewish. They're called temples, and they go through some motions of being Jewish. So the lady rabbi wears the yarmulke. Usually the lady rabbi wears the yarmulke, and the man rabbi does not wear the yarmulke. The lady rabbi wears the talis. And they get up and they sermonize on everything but Jewish subjects, on gay marriage and on transgenderism. And they go and they get rainbow. We just had Pride Month, where they actually had rainbow cupcakes for children to teach children about the joys of lesbianism and homosexuality and transgenderism. This is not Judaism. Rabbi Rick Jacobs, president of the Union of Jewish Reform, the UJR, made a speech in Louisville, Kentucky. It was reported in the Louisville paper, Community, where he said more than half of all members of Reformed temples now are in intermarriages. More than half the members of Reformed Judaism now are not even Jewish. So what kind of Judaism can they speak? Can they get up in front of a congregation and talk about Torah when half the people in the room aren't even Jewish? And they themselves don't know it. They themselves don't understand Talmud. They themselves have never heard of half the commentators, Sforno and Ibn Ezra, Rambam and Ramban, Rashi and Tosafot, Maharsha and the Meiri, the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, the Chafetz Chaim's Mishnah Berurah. They don't themselves even know about these texts. They don't even know the texts exist. How can they teach them? So they get up. What are they going to talk about? It's the old joke. And the old joke, it's not even funny, but the old joke is that the rabbi gets the job, and he gets up the first week and he talks about kosher, and the board of directors meet with him and say, Rabbi, you offended many members of the temple who aren't kosher. Please don't talk again about kosher. Next week he talks about Shabbat. Rabbi, you offended many members of the temple whose businesses are open on Saturday. The next week he gets up and he talks about a Jew should marry a Jew, and they come and they meet with him. Rabbi, this is the third week in a row you're losing members at this temple. Half of our members aren't even married to Jews. So the rabbi says, what in the world should I talk about? Well, Rabbi, talk about Judaism. and that's really what's going on in those temples. Unfortunately, it's a tragedy.
Rabbi, we definitely need to have you come back on again, because we certainly did. We have so many more things to talk to you about. So we're definitely going to invite you back. I have one final question. What do you think of the Jewish Republican Alliance, our mission, being really the only national organization that is a voice for Jewish conservatives? What are your thoughts on our organization?
Bruce, very, very briefly, and then I'll very briefly remind me of the guy who goes out on a date with a lady, and he finds through the course of dinner, she says to him, all night long, you've just been talking about yourself. I mean, what kind of date has this been? He said, you're really right. I apologize. I should talk about you. What do you think of my latest book? So you just asked me about the JRA. I love your question, but I love the Jewish Republican Alliance. In fact, when this is over today, I'll be sending I don't know if other speakers have done it, but I'm actually going to be doing the opposite. Normally you pay an honorarium to the person who comes. I'll be sending a donation to the Jewish Republican Alliance. It gives me great pride that there is a JRA, and it is part of the answer I actually give people when they say to me questions about, let's say, Jonathan Greenblatt, the Obama operative who was put in charge of the ADL. I talk about the Jewish Republican Alliance. You want to talk about Jewish organizations, I'll talk about Coalition for Jewish Values, which represents 2,500 Orthodox rabbis. I'll talk about Zionist organization. I'll talk about Jewish Republican Alliance.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
That means so much to us, Rabbi. Thank you.
Really does. Thank you so much for being here, for your candid thoughts, and we definitely want to see you back on again.
I'm warning you, I might come again.
We would enjoy that very much.
Thanks a lot.
To everybody out there, thank you so much for being here. A lot of you have emailed me and asked about more live events. Yes, we're in the process of doing that. We're talking to several presidential candidates about trying to put on a town hall where Mitch is going to be starting his chapter over in Tennessee. So that's moving on. We're having more live events and lunches here coming on. So we just want to let you know we're going to continue to do that. We take our role very seriously, and we want to make sure that you guys are able to stay informed, get involved, and make a difference. Thank you all for being here. Until we meet again, Shabbat Shalom. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.